In this video, we're going to be upgrading this TRX4M Bronco using the Traxxas recommended upgrade shocks. I'm going to show you how to install them, how to assemble these shocks, and to give a full test to see how they perform. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Troy. This is Roadside RC. You'll tend to find me crawling and bashing and drifting and racing, plus doing product review videos and how-tos. And this TRX4M, a very exciting new crawler out there in the market, does come with actually some decent shocks out of the factory, but really looking to dampen the overall body movement and control of this vehicle with this shock upgrade that Traxxas does offer. But before we get putting these on, we need to do a couple tests to see how this truck does stock so that we have a baseline to test after we put these on. Quick flex test here with the front. Pull the front up, see when that rear comes off the ground. We're at about 50 millimeters right at the shoulder. This shock kit comes with the 4 shocks, oil, a little dropper for the oil itself, a couple shock clips to adjust preload, and then instructions and spacing for how the overall shock assembles. It does not come with springs, so you will need to be reusing the springs from the stock shocks. So the first step here is we need to get these shock caps off and get oil in these because these do ship dry. I am going to use the recommended oil. This is a 20 weight oil that comes with it to test that out first. Obviously, we may tune with different shock oil later. This is rather simple. You're going to pop this bottom collar off so that it is not lost. And you are going to unscrew this, making sure that this blue bladder comes with it. And now you will be able to see inside the piston and that it is completely dry. Take this cap off of this oil and then you can cut or peel this seal off here. With that mostly off, you can push this stopper into it to help you all the way in until that rubber seal, and then that way you have a good seal and it's not going to leak out around the edge. And then this cap comes off. We're going to trim this top, and now we have the ability to put shock oil in. So we will compress in here. It's probably not going to take a lot. These are very small shocks. Once you start getting some oil in them, you're going to want to work it up and down. It lets a lot of the air out. Keep filling it as you go. Keep working it to get more and more of the air out. Alright, and once you get most of the air out, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move over here and I'm going to set this shock in to this holder over here because I want it to stay upright. I want it to stay upright and let some more of that air bleed out. So I'm going to wedge it in just like that very carefully because I don't really have anywhere else to stick it. I now have all the shocks full of oil. It's sitting here letting some of the bubbles still dissipate. Now, one thing I want to be clear with, it doesn't show in the instructions, is you want to actually separate this little neoprene damper here versus the shock cap for when we reinstall. Because what you're going to want to do, depending on how you want your shock set, if you have the shock in this kind of a position before you put the diaphragm in, it'll want to come back to more this closed position. If you assemble the shock fully extended like this, it'll want to kind of come back to this normal position. A lot of the times I try to stick it somewhere in the middle, and then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to slide this cover in. You may get a little bit of oil out, that's okay, and you can get that off. But that makes sure that you don't have any trapped air in there. You then put the cap back on. Alright, the instructions do not clearly say this, but that is how you want to do it. Now that we have all 4 shocks built, it's onto the truck itself, where we're going to be taking the body off and we're going to actually get into removing these shocks and swapping the springs over and reinstalling. The first step here is to remove all 4 tires and wheels because we need to be able to get to the lower shock mounting positions. With the wheels off, it's a very simple 1.5 millimeter wrench, bottom screw, top screw, and this whole shock will come off. It looks like on all 4 corners it'll be the same on each spot. With the shock off, you simply compress the spring and pop that lower shock perch off, and then you can remove the spring itself. I'm going to note as I go through if these shocks have any preload collars on them, and I will transfer those preload collars over to the new shock if necessary. Again, compress it on the new shock, put the new spring perch down here on the bottom, pop it all the way on, and then you have one assembled spring and shock ready to go back on to the truck. All four new shocks are set up on all four corners, and so we're going to get the tires and wheels back on and do a quick test to see if we can tell any difference in how the truck performs. Confirming quickly the flex on this, again coming up until that lower tire. It's actually a little bit less for some reason. Before we had about 50 millimeters, now we're right at about, we had about 50 and now we're about 40. So we've actually lost a little bit of flex with the truck for some reason. So, when we look at the slow speed footage of the truck actually coming down and how do those shocks absorb, it's kind of hard to tell a difference, actually. And maybe I'll rerun that right here for you real quick. Side by side, you can see the factory shock versus the upgraded, and I can't really tell a difference. So we didn't do any dampening difference. Not that, like, you know, the truck's normally going to be jumping from a height, but, you know, you can't really tell that it softened it up that way at all. And we somehow lost a little bit of flex. I don't know if there's a little bit of binding, if maybe, you know, yeah. I don't know if there's a little bit of binding there. I don't know if it's just a little bit difference in the length of the shock, but it turns out it also doesn't have as much flex as it did before, which maybe is okay actually for side hilling and stuff. I don't know if I'll see a big difference out on the trail with it, but man, those are some expensive shocks to be putting on these vehicles to not really be able to see a difference with them. I'm going to leave them on there, bottom, they're on there now, it's not a big deal. But you might want to look around if you're about to put shocks on your TRX4M. So hope this was useful for you, and if you are interested, I do have a whole other playlist of TRX4M stuff right over here, and you can check it out, and I will see you in that video. Thank you, and goodbye.